Yo, what's going on, you guys? This is your boy RBG, aka The Random Black Gamer, bringing you another video on Sparking Zero, which is something you guys haven't heard me talk about in quite some time. I know a lot of you have been paying attention to this game because there's been so much talk going on about it not living up to the hype it initially got upon its reveal. And I've been trying to make videos on this for the longest time. My wife even told me I need to get up off my ass and make something because it's been so long since I produced any long form content, so we're gonna do that today. But before we dive into today's topic, I want you guys to do your boy the biggest favor and give this video a thumbs up. Yeah, I know it's annoying getting this request at the very beginning of the video before you watched it in its entirety, but YouTube's algorithm encourages it. So if you rock with your boy and you know I'm gonna bring you that awesome content, then smash that like button. And if by any chance you feel like you wasted 10 minutes of your time that you can't get back, then feel free to retract that like and give it a dislike. Just rate the video. But anyways, I think it's safe to say that we've officially passed the honeymoon phase for Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. And upon release, there were a lot of good things said about this game. But as time has gone on, a lot of negative comments have started to accumulate. And I want to come from a neutral stance on this because I noticed that there have been so many videos talking about the downfall of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. And while those videos are warranted, I just want to come in and say that I'm not in that group of people that thinks that this game is just downright irrelevant. It's not a game that has fallen off completely. I feel like there is still a lot of wind in the sails of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero that can keep it going for quite some time. I think the biggest hurdle that it has to overcome is post-launch content, because that's the particular aspect of this game that has been underwhelming, to say the least. There just isn't enough to satiate our appetites to keep us coming back to play this game, which is a downright shame because the Budokai Tenkaichi / Sparking series is known for its replayability. Like back when times were a lot simpler and you were playing those games, we didn't necessarily have any online component. Like with the exception of the Wii version of Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3, we were pretty much limited to local multiplayer, and it was fun. It was something that we enjoyed doing because those titles were packed to the brim with content. If you wanted to find a character or if you want to unlock something, you could put in that work. You can also go out of your way to do like the disc fusion thing that I think they have for Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2, where you take the disc to Tenkaichi 1 and put it in the game while Tenkaichi 2 is on, which allowed you to unlock hidden characters as well as items. And don't get me started on the story modes, man. Dragon Adventure is arguably the best when it comes to giving you everything that you love about Dragon Ball Z and making you come in with different approaches, because based on the outcome, you know, things change. You know, you get certain characters, the story changes to where you would go in a different direction than you initially would, and all these different paths are made, such as what if sagas. I just love all the different things that came with those older games. They were very feature rich, and when it comes to Sparking Zero, it seems like it's lacking that. There are so many different things that make it feel like it's something unfamiliar. And I remember when this game was first announced, I told a lot of people that, hey, even though this is trying to recapture that essence of what we got with the Sparking series, don't expect it to be perfect. Don't expect it to properly mimic everything that we got with the original trilogy, because we're essentially dealing with a team that's not necessarily the same one we got for those older installments. This is an entirely new team made up of fans who grew up playing those games, who wanted to remake those titles with a modern facelift, which meant that you were going to have to build everything from the ground up. This isn't something where you could just take the old fighting engine and insert it into a new Unreal Engine. No, they had to redo everything from the ground up, so I already knew that there were going to be things that felt off compared to the originals. You know what I'm saying? You can try to replicate one of your mom's best dishes, but there's always going to be that one little ingredient that throws everything off, which prevents it from being perfect, which is the overall gameplay, which has been one of the most criticized aspects of Dragon Ball Z Sparking Zero. There are so many different things that aren't necessarily balanced and tailored to our liking, and fans have come out in droves to express their dissatisfaction with these things. And in hindsight, I already knew this was bound to happen because the original Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi series wasn't necessarily built with balance in mind. It was not necessarily trying to cater to that hardcore FGC audience. It was just trying to make a good game that replicates all the things that we see in the Dragon Ball Z mangas and shows, where you get all of these awesome characters and the cool moves that are associated with them, right? You get those things that you see them do in the show, but you aren't necessarily thinking about how those things are going to translate in video game format, which are for the most part an unbalanced and unmitigated disaster. Like, there have been a lot of characters that you would least expect to just just dominate the top of the charts when it comes to online matches, such as Yajirobe, who came out the gate swinging as this anchor character that can be a nuisance, especially if you're fighting in team battles and you want that character to just kind of bog down your opponent's team and chip away at their health. You can get somebody like Yajirobe who has the Senzu Bean technique. And you got the notorious androids, who the less said about them the better. The game is just racked with so many glaring issues and they haven't been fixed in a timely fashion. There's still a lot of work being put into this and it's not being done at the pace that people would like. And once again, I had to reiterate that this isn't necessarily being done by the same Spike that we grew up playing games from. This is being done by Spike Chunsoft, which is the same team that's largely responsible for producing a lot of duds that we've seen in the past, such as Jump Force, a title that lacked any kind of player support and would ultimately become inaccessible due to its decontinuation on all storefronts, as well as its online servers being completely shut down. So I'm not necessarily surprised in the way the developers have responded to these things. They have been doing little things here and there, but it just hasn't been at a pacing that we would like. Something that I find funny and a bit ironic is the fact that back when Dragon Ball Sparking Zero was getting ready to come out, a lot of people would try to pile up on games like Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 because people consider Xenoverse 2 to be that friend that just won't go away based on all the DLC that it gets on a yearly basis. And I always found that weird that it would get so much backlash because at the end of the day, we're living in a time where we're getting so much DBZ content in different kinds of fashions. So having that variety is a good thing in my honest opinion, but you would always have those individuals say, why is this game coming out with content when Sparking Zero is coming out? As if the developers of Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 was just supposed to up and stop producing content just because of that fact. And you guys have heard me say this incessantly. If there's a development team that others should follow, then it should absolutely be Dimps, especially when it comes to Dragon Ball Z games, because they've essentially tapped into the matrix when it comes to overall staying power and keeping people interested in their game. That's why they were able to reign as the top selling Dragon Ball Z game for so long. And I'm not necessarily sure on this, but I would like to believe that their core player base is more active than the one that Sparking Zero has. And it's simply because they still have things that you can do within that game. You don't necessarily have to just go online or anything like that. You can actually play these new DLCs that feature not only new characters as well as abilities that you can add to your created character, but stages and actual stories, man. That's the thing that Dragon Ball Z Sparking Zero is lacking. That nice hefty amount of content that warrants the bang for their buck. And it just seems like Dimps is a masterclass when it comes to that particular aspect. Like, keep in mind, this is the same team that developed all of those awesome Dragon Ball Z Budokai games. And this is the same team that would go on to develop Dragon Ball Heroes, which is an extremely popular arcade game that lasted 14 years, guys. 14 years! And it was built off of the same graphics engine that was used for the Budokai games. So if you're wondering why they are so good at keeping games like Xenoverse 2 alive for so long, it's because they've already had the experience and they know how to keep the fans engaged. That's the thing that Spike Chunsoft needs to take notes of. I kind of see that with CyberConnect 2 and Dragon Ball Z Kakarot because they're moving in a similar fashion when it comes to that particular game, where they're giving us stuff like Dragon Ball Daima, and not only do we have new characters, we also have these new maps and locations and new cinematics that replicate the things that we saw in Dragon Ball Daima, which is crazy because we don't get any of that in Sparking Zero. The only thing that we get are new characters, and that's that. We don't get any new story modes attached to these characters, and we don't even get any maps, which the game is already lacking. There are so many maps that should be in this game. They should have been in the core game if you ask me. Like, there's no reason why this game has so many Universe 6 characters, but the Tournament of Destroyers isn't in the story mode, and you can't even have the stage. Come on now. Like, if you guys have been following things in regards to stages for Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, then you'll notice that there are a lot of stages built into this game, but they aren't accessible for whatever reason. I'm not sure if it's because they're kind of running late on programming all the things that need to be in those stages, such as destructible environments. If I'm not mistaken, that was one of the main reasons why we initially weren't going to get a local multiplayer mode, and it would take so long for us to get stages added to that local multiplayer. But the modding community has done an exceptional job of bringing those things to the forefront for the PC. And I can only imagine that there are a lot of console players that are very envious of that fact, man, just seeing that these things are readily available, but they aren't necessarily accessible. And you would think that these things will be easy to implement, you know, because these are stages at the end of the day. They aren't necessarily full-fledged maps like we see in other games like Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. They're just maps with barriers around them. There's only so far you can go. You just stay in this small space and you fight. So that's one of those things that they really need to work on, actually trying to give us something in regards to the stories as well as more maps, man. Like, I know we live in an era where all of the primary focus is put on the online experience because they know that there are going to be those competitive players who want to take their characters online and face off against other players. But I honestly feel like some of that time and attention needs to be put into things like the story mode. Like, episode battle just feels so incomplete and like an afterthought, which is unfortunate because there is so much potential there. There's so many different things that you can add to that to keep people playing for years on end, but for whatever reason Spike Chunsoft isn't capitalizing on that. Sparking Zero should be the swan song of the Tenkaichi series, man. Like, if it were up to me, I would be bringing all these classic stages such as the Glacier, the Kame House, all the stages that we've had in the yesteryear. I would bring those back, and I would also make it a point to bring back things like classic songs for the previous Tenkaichi games. Like Ultimate Tenkaichi, as bad as that game is, it has a banging soundtrack, and I would love to hear some of those older songs up in Sparking Zero. But yeah, man, these are just my overall thoughts on the current state of Sparking Zero. Do I feel like the game is dead? No, I feel like there's still a lot of work there is to be done, and I think that they are starting to get in gear. I honestly feel like this could be a similar story to Street Fighter V, because if you guys remember, when that game initially launched, it didn't really have any content in it. But over time, Capcom was able to hamper down and deliver a game that was very great and superseded what we initially got. And I honestly feel like Spike Chunsoft could do the same thing with Sparking Zero. I mean, we're living in a time where Bandai Namco gives these developers more creative leeway to continue to produce content for these games that have been out for years, and Sparking Zero is one of those games that I feel like people will come back to play more because it already has a pretty solid foundation. Like I said, the presentation is good. I like the way the characters move. Certain things, they need to be buffered out, but overall I feel like this is a good game to start with. They had to recreate this fighting engine from the ground up, so I'm pretty sure that took a lot of time, but now that we passed that point, we can actually start adding things that matter, such as decent to good balancing patches for the characters, and also content, which is the main thing that this game lacks. But anyways, what are your thoughts on this? I didn't want to ramble on too long because I know I get passionate and I tend to go all over the place. I go on these tangents, man. That's just how I am when it comes to Dragon Ball Z video games. But what are your thoughts on this? Do you feel like the developers can bounce back with Sparking Zero, or do you feel like the game is pretty much dead? Let me know in the comment section below. As always, I ask that you like or dislike the video. It doesn't have to be a thumbs up, it can be a thumbs down. But if you really enjoyed this video, it would help me out tremendously if you shared it with all your friends and followers on all the different social media outlets. Sharing really makes a difference. But once again, this is your boy RBG, aka The Random Black Gamer, signing out on another video. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.